All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We've got recurring guests. We got Mike Yam, NFL Network anchor. Mike, how's everything going for you?
Doing well, man. Staying healthy. That's, I think, all we can ask for right now. And can't wait for an upcoming season where I would assume we're back to normal. We got fans, a crazy amount of fans inside those stadiums. And we're back at a time that I think we all just miss dearly.
Yeah, no, I can't. Sundays aren't the same. It's only been a week. Like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know
I
what I'm.
know.
Yeah, now we do have some breaking news today. Biggest storyline of
Yeah.
a while. Ricardo Allen was released, but no, that's now. Carson Wentz was traded to the Indianapolis Colts for conditional second and third.
Yeah.
Apparently, not many other teams put out offers. What were your thoughts on that whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's a story that we've been sort of tracking. We knew things would get a little crazy. This kind of like this off season. What about 2 weeks, probably just a little more than 2 weeks ago, you had the Goff and the Matthew Stafford trade. So you just assumed, and we were kind of waiting on when this was going to happen. In fact, we almost thought like it was going to happen a couple of weeks ago, and it didn't. And then out of the blue, like you said, it's just it's out there, and I think it's a win-win in a lot of ways for both of these franchises. And it's a win, I think, for Carson Wentz. Like if you said to me, hey, pick the team that he would fit in best with, I think there's a lot of obvious reasons why the Colts are that team. When you talk about familiarity with this coaching staff, obviously his head coach, Frank Wright, and you think about the seasons that he had when he was his offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, that was when Carson was at his peak. He's got an offensive line that's tremendous. I was freelancing, Zach, during the football season with Intel Sports, and two of the teams that we had pretty consistently were Tampa Bay and Indianapolis. So I got an up close and personal look at that Colts team every single week, and that offensive line is terrific. And that was one of the issues that I think Carson had in Philadelphia. Now he slides in where he's got some weapons. He's got a running a game that I think really surged in a big way in the second half of the season. So across the board, win for him. I think a win for this Colts organization. Philly doesn't necessarily get the amount of first round picks that they had initially had asked for. And I know right now on paper it's conditional first round pick, but if there's some basic threshold that Carson meets, I think it's like 75% of the games he's got to play or something along those lines, that'll turn into a first round pick. So all indications are Philly at least gets potentially the first rounder that they were looking for. And sort of the circus around this team. Got a new coaching staff in Philadelphia. They get to get a fresh start, don't have to worry about the drama associated with this. So, in sports, it's not typical we say both sides or three sides win, but in this situation, I think both teams and Wentz all winners here.
Do you think Sudfeld's ready to lead the Eagles?
I think I might pause on something like that, but it's wild too, right? Like even think about it from Zach, like a Philadelphia perspective. I think about, and I've thought a lot about this. I think I've had me and everyone else, more free time than we would like. Thinking about life and some other things. I try to focus my attention on football. One other note on this is this idea, and it's not tangible, right? Like you can't see something on the field with Carson Wentz, besides maybe like the 15 interceptions in 12 games, and say, hey, like that's obvious. Like those are things that were not good. But what's it like to play in a city like Philadelphia? Now, I grew up in the Northeast, just outside of New York City, and grew up a Giants fan. So, I understand like those markets are a little bit different. He's going to get inserted back into an Indianapolis sports town that A, is pretty forgiving, and B, pretty damn supportive. So to me, just another wrinkle here when you try to dissect what's happening right now with this trade.
Yeah, and he reconnects with Trey Burton. So
yeah.
So, and then do you expect to see Deshaun Watson moved anytime soon?
No. I know that there's been a lot of hype and a lot of speculation about that. I don't see. I just look, if I'm Houston, I get it. Like this is a guy that's not happy, that wants to move on. But at the same time, like, what are you going to get for him? I said this before, right? Like in the Wentz deal, it seems like everyone wins. I got to be honest with you. Like, I don't know if there's a situation where Houston wins in any regard when you go and trade a quarterback like like Deshaun Watson. I legitimately, I think he's top 5 guy. He's not even close to, those peak years. Like you're basically saying like, hey, I can get a franchise quarterback for the next 10 plus years on my roster who's still playing at a ridiculously high level with more upside still in his game. I mean, he was a one-man wrecking crew even last season. And I know that they missed the postseason, but how many times have we watched these games where Houston's knocking on the door and they're only competitive because of Deshaun Watson? So I don't know, for Nick Caserio, who takes over, the GM responsibilities there, like I sit back and I say, like, how am I supposed to rebuild? Like, sure, do you get a bunch of kicks for Deshaun Watson? Yeah, absolutely. But like, those aren't guarantees, right? I mean, like, there's no guarantee that any of these picks or any of these guys, and look, I think it's a talented draft class that's coming in, but I just don't know. I think there's too much money that they gave him up front. And I do think that there's an expectation level, like, dude, you're going to have to kind of suck it up and make this work. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that take, but if you're asking me if Houston trades him, I don't think that happens. I think week 1, Deshaun Watson's still going to be their quarterback.
You think he'd hold out?
I don't know. I've been around some people that know Deshaun pretty well, especially when, he was in school, in college, that is, and was around the Elite 11 program. And one of my good friends is kind of ingrained in that. And I don't think Deshaun's got that in him, and look, fast forward, like now he's been a few years as a pro. I get it. There's agents that are involved in that situation. And, Deshaun's a really high level class act. So, and it's not to say that you're not classy if you're holding out. I look at him as sort of like the face of that franchise, a leader in that locker room. And I don't even think the players would be all that upset. I think most of those guys kind of support each other, on decisions like that. And you got to take care of your business the way that you do. But I just, there's something in me, Zach, it absolutely could happen. If you said to me, like, do I think he holds out? I don't know if I see that happening.
Do they still have Tom Savage? They could use him.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think, kind of mending fences and trying to figure that out. Like there is a lot to be said for communication. And, we've seen other players, former players, talk about their stay in Houston and not always be thrilled with the direction of that franchise. Here's the other thing, man, like Deshaun just signed like a pretty massive contract, like not too long ago. And, I think there's something to be said for, a level of consistency, comfort, and being happy where you are. I get it. The direction of the franchise is not where he wants it to go. I do think that is a tough pill to swallow, though, for an organization to say, dude, like we just paid you a ton of guaranteed money. You're pretty new into this contract. Like that's not what the game plan is. And I think that's that delta. And that's what makes, what's going to happen and a really tough decision for the Texans right now in trying to decide how they want to handle this.
And then, so looking at free agency, because I think we're less than a month away from the start of the new league year. Are there any big names that you're expecting that are unrestricted that you think might be jumping ship from their current situation?
It's a great call. I think, across the board, I was just looking at, some wide receivers that are out there and available. And obviously on the defensive side, people are going to be talking about JJ Watt because we were just talking about Houston. That certainly comes to mind. And the options that he's going to have now as a guy that maybe wants to play with his families up in Pittsburgh, which would be kind of cool. And people have thrown out Tennessee. People have said even Tampa Bay. Cleveland's come up. Like, I think that's just kind of cool and intriguing because I think there's still, plenty left in the tank for a guy like JJ Watt. But, as far as guys that, we could see high level players, look at different teams, at the wide receiver spot, I immediately think, and I made reference to spending time watching a lot of Indianapolis and Tampa Bay, but, how about a guy like Chris Godwin, who was terrific, this past season, really came on strong, and knack for the big play, the confidence that Tom Brady had in him. Now, I don't know if he necessarily leaves, but I do think that's, he's a gem that's potentially out there. Speaking of Indianapolis, like if we've seen T.Y. Hilton, which would be weird to me if T.Y. is not in that uniform, I still think he's there. What's that?
He's been there.
I know. Seriously, it's kind of crazy, Zach. Like, I was doing a talk a while back with some college students on, broadcasting, and it was something that I did and still continue to do, but I used to do a ton of it when at my previous employer, like, I'd be on a lot of college campuses and talk to a lot of the students there. So I would show them a reel, and I had my old ESPN reel, and it was right before T.Y. Hilton had gotten drafted, and I'm asking a question about T.Y., and it like strikes me. It's like, it feels like, 30 years ago that I had worked at ESPN, and we're having those conversations. But to your point, he's been a staple in that lineup. I don't think he leaves, but just another guy that, has got potentially some options there. And then Juju certainly comes to mind. I think it has been abundantly clear, Zach, if I'm not mistaken, I think we might have even talked about Juju last time I came on with you.
Possibly.
And I think it's abundantly clear how much damage that this guy can do when he is the number two. Like, I think he is a ridiculously high level number two guy. When and creates a ton of mismatch problems. And we saw it when he was at USC. We've even seen it, with his ability in the NFL, with his size and strength and speed. But he does flourish as a number two. And I think there's going to be some options for him. So, it's kind of the cool thing is, the league tries to figure out like the salary cap situation and like things that need to get figured out, and what money teams will go and have. Like, there's a world where you could see, some more maybe 1 year deals, as more of like a show it to me, prove it, and then we'll talk and try to make some cash on the back end. So I think it's a really intriguing time for the league.
And so, speaking of your previous employer, one of the quarterbacks I know you spent some time with and a lot of time covering had a remarkable season in Justin Herbert. Did you see this coming? Or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, Justin was terrific in college. And I think what's really interesting about it is, one, this is a guy that decided to go back for another year, right? Like, there was talk about him 2 years ago as a guy that could have come out in the draft. And that's not an easy decision for a lot of quarterbacks. And I think more times than not, most guys tend to leave early and try to make that cash. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I see you saw the improvement at Oregon from, 2 years ago to the last season, or I should say 3 seasons ago. And then his last season in Eugene, there's all the accolades that come with winning, right? Like the turnaround, multiple coaches, winning a Rose Bowl, another, Pac-12, championship. Like, that's really cool. But his development as a player was also pretty remarkable. If you're asking me, did I see him having this level of success this quickly? The answer is hell no. Did I think he was going to be a really good, talented starting quarterback in the NFL for a long period of time that was going to be the face of that franchise eventually? Yes. I just didn't see it happening in his rookie season. And I also think it's a testament to this ability, like, where the stage is not too big for him. Like, Justin is not, he's not like this crazy extrovert who is this rah, God, I'm going to pick the quarterback that's out there that's just kind of jumping up on, a Baker Mayfield type, right? Like, who's just kind of like, revving everyone up. That's not Justin's personality. And yet when he was in Eugene and he spoke, the guys listened, and it didn't happen a lot. In fact, a funny story was in his early days at Oregon and Eugene, Mark Helfrich was his head coach. And Mark, during the practices, would say, you have to say something after every single play to someone on the team. I mean, that's kind of what it was. But I also look at not only the mental maturity and his growth over time in Eugene, but then take it a step further in his physical development. I remember seeing him, early on, like as a sophomore, and certainly the size was there. But when he starts to fill out and you look at his hands and you shake his hand, and it's like engulfing, basically my entire arm, which is not saying much at 5'8", $155. But the point is, like, there was these physical tools that were out there, the haymakers that he throws pretty consistently, where there's a trust in those wide receivers. It's been remarkable watching him, and thrilled for his success with that organization.
Do you think he had anything to do with that hit on Tyrod's punctured lung?
Hell no. Because I don't think, if you said to him, like, hey, you get to start, but you find out 5 minutes before, kickoff, I mean, that's not an easy situation. He even thrives in those circumstances. So kudos to him, man. And I think if anyone, and I get it, like, most people don't know him, and I don't know him all that well, just from, a handful of interviews and some interaction, off the field, a really, really, I was going to say sweet kid, which is probably not the best way to classify a football player, but he's a humble kid. He's a bright guy. And I'm thrilled for his success.
My hot take about that situation that I completely made up, and I have no reason to believe it whatsoever, is that you could see a little bit during the season. He had a little bit of kind of like pimples breaking out on his face. And my hot take was that AccuView had been trying to get him, and AccuView paid the team doctor to get him in the game. And then after the season, he's going to have billboards put up in LA. No claim. I don't know if it's true. I don't think it's true, but I don't know. And then so we're about about 2 months away from the draft. Is anybody catching your attention, like outside of like the Trevor Lawrences and the Zach Wilsons? Anybody that you're excited to see at the next level?
Yeah, actually, a few guys for sure. And look, I mean, you just mentioned a couple high level guys, and I know you're not necessarily asking for those types of players, but I'll throw two names your way, and it has less to do with, I think, the physical gifts that one of these players has, but I think there is such this clear cut perception of Trevor Lawrence being one. Justin Fields, man, like there were times on the football field where you're like, dude, this guy is ridiculous. And then other times where you say like, hey, I get like the ceiling's pretty high. Where's the floor? And I think that's one of the great things about Trevor Lawrence. Like we think high ceiling, but we also don't think about a low floor. And I think there are some games that we saw from Fields where you said, oh, geez, like this dude can really play. I just want to see what he is as an NFL quarterback. That has nothing to do with where he's going to get picked or what I think he's going to be. I just think I can't wait to see him in an NFL uniform. And then the other thing is like some of these players who opted out, and I think, as I'm watching, MLB Network or, all these sports that have had to deal, the NFL didn't miss one game because of COVID. So it's a testament to the league. It's a testament to the organizations and the players that took it seriously, and a lot of other leagues have had to alter things, whether it's stop downs in college athletics and shortened seasons like we've seen in other sports, what are those long-term ramifications? And I think for the college football side of things, as you saw players opt out, whether it was Jamar Chase, right? Like we're talking about him, like he's probably the first wide receiver taken off the board. And yet Devontae Smith's the guy that people talk about, Waddle, his teammate, another player that everyone seems to focus in on. Like you almost forget, it's like out of sight, out of mind. And I want to know, what is that gap of not playing competitive college football? What does that mean for you in year number one? How does that change your development? So Chase certainly comes to mind. And then the guy that I think is maybe, the best, offensive lineman in the draft, who was talking about Justin Herbert, but Penei Sewell, who also opted out. As weird as it sounds, and maybe it was a West Coast thing, because Zach, I'm still in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And obviously I still am associated with the Pac-12 just through Sirius XM. So like I keep tabs clearly, and I love the league. I keep tabs on a lot of these players, but I don't know if it was a West Coast thing before the season started, but there was talk about Penei Sewell being, maybe the most important player on any football team in the nation, and then he decides to opt out. And there was, some underlying, I don't think it would have happened, but like, hey, like where could he finish in a Heisman vote? I mean, he is that talented. And, speaking of young quarterbacks, like, Cincinnati, do they think about him? I think about what Joe Burrow was able to do in his rookie season. So, Sewell would look good, kind of protecting his blind side, especially a guy coming off of an injury. So a couple of those names. And I think for me, more importantly, the guys that decided not to participate in last season and opt out because of COVID to get ready for the draft. What happened? Where do they land in the draft is one, and then two, what are they in year number one as rookies on Sundays?
I might have been making this up, but did I see a picture of Penei Sewell in the last week hanging out with Dennis Rodman? Did you hear this? Did you see this?
I did not see that. That would be one of the more unique things I've heard of. Yeah.
Yeah, I could have sworn, like, I can't find it, but I could have sworn he was hanging out with somebody. I'm like, that's an interesting friendship. But
it's a weird duo. Like I would feel like if you said to me, Rodman was up in, Pullman watching his son play basketball under Kyle Smith at Washington State, I'd be like, oh, okay, like that's not surprising. The Penei Sewell, Dennis Rodman friendship, but like Dennis knows like dictators in communist countries. So
I'm like, this seems like not probably the best draft advisor to be going for Penei. So that's interesting. And then do you have any bold predictions for the offseason for the draft that you think might come true?
Oh God, I didn't even think of that. Let's see, like off the top of my head, like draft wise, I don't know if there's going to be any like we like I say we, right? Like the league has navigated the COVID draft. Like we've seen that happen. And the lack of those combine experiences, like that's not nothing new. So I think teams, kind of figured it out, and I think they thrived, to be honest with you, last season. I think, you sort of have to change your evaluation of players and how, I shouldn't say you change the evaluation. You change maybe the process in evaluating players. It is very different. Boots on the ground for scouts when they're on these campuses. I've been at plenty of colleges, over the last couple of years, and the scouts are there. Like, how do they get the intel? How do they get the real story behind some of these players? What are sort of these intangible things that are not numbers based, that are not what you see on the film? That's out there. I'll give you an example, like Kevin King, who's had a pretty good career, so far. He played at Washington. Like the one thing for me is like, how much is Kevin King, a team guy? Like I remember being up in Seattle, Washington, when Chris Peterson was there watching practice, and Kevin King would be out there working with wide receivers after practice for an extended period of time to get those guys better. So it wasn't a surprise, to see Kevin, obviously, who was talented on the field, but like, you're not there. You don't see those types of things. That's not necessarily a bold prediction that you're looking for. I'm trying to think of like their blockbuster trade that could go down, and I can't give you something concrete, but I am looking forward to, this off season with the potential moves, because it feels like almost like a soap opera that the NBA has been with, like kind of these super teams and all this other stuff. And like, what happens, like, is Ben Roethlisberger going to be the quarterback for the Steelers this upcoming season? Like, like I still am surprised that organization hasn't more leaned that way for a guy that's making 19 million, which is, not for nothing, man. It's kind of like middle of the pack in the NFL, like not asking for a raise, face of a franchise but the point is, like, I don't know if he's even going to be there with that football team. So maybe that's the bold prediction, which doesn't feel all that bold. So it's kind of a weak, actual bold prediction, but you're going to have to live with it.
Do you see Sam Darnold on the move?
I hope not.
Really?
Yeah, it's another guy that I saw a ton of when he was at USC. Here's my thing on it. I think Sam Darnold's like, what, 23, if I'm not mistaken. Like, he's running for his life. I think he's a super talented quarterback. Like, what do you do if you're the Jets? Like, if you go and draft another quarterback this year in the first round, how is he going to be better than Sam Darnold? I don't know the answer to it. What issues have you alleviated? Like, is it Sam Darnold's fault that you haven't won football game? Like, I don't look at him and say, hey, he's the culprit. Now, do I think there's some things that Sam Darnold could be doing better on the football field? No doubt. He would tell you that. He has said that numerous times, but I do think you're starting from scratch when you go and draft a quarterback. Like, I would rather them trade down, accumulate picks, and fill a lot of holes that need to be filled. And to me, it also starts with some weapons on the outside for Darnold. Not super impressed by what you saw from that wide receiving core for the Jets. And this is a really good draft class when it comes to wide receiver. Again, like last year was. I think about some of the players that were taken in later rounds. And my God, like some real high-level producers at that position. I think it's the same thing this year for the draft. So to me, I would like the Jets to hold on to Sam Darnold, trade out of that pick, accumulate more picks, and try to fill some of these holes and see what you got there with Sam. And by the way, like, there's still another year for him before you have to pay him. So you do add and you fill some holes, and then you could figure out, like, like, this is not working, then you can move on. To me, I hope that the Jets give him another chance and he is not on the move.
Because if he is on the move, Washington better be calling, because I don't know what the hell they're planning on doing next year.
Yeah. Washington, though, they're speaking of, like, the draft, like, there's talk about, in that first round, what are they picking, like 17? I got it, 19. So, Washington might be looking at like a Mac Jones, for example. Like, I know I've seen some mock drafts with him there, and like, I could see your face, and what's weird about that, because you're kind of like, not crazy about it. What's wild to me is his perception as a college quarterback, right? Like, I think you can make an argument in a lot of ways, like on the football field, like Tua, everyone loved him, right? Like, is there a dramatic difference? Like, I think the mobility for Mac isn't quite what it was for Tua, but like, Mac's not making mistakes out on the football field. So I do think there's something to be said. I think actually Jones would be, I would not be shocked if the Washington football team decides to go with a guy like that. They have a history of drafting Alabama players. There's been that over the last couple of years or so. So just something to keep in mind. You're right. Like, I'd be curious to see where they go.
Yeah, no, because to me, like, I was very hyped about Tua's kind of
Sure.
underwhelmed his first season, but to me, the best, the last great Alabama quarterback in the NFL was Joe Namath. So we'll see. But
There's hype around those guys because in a lot of ways they are an extension of the NFL in college. You're right about sort of that high level success at that position. For what it's worth, and I know like the patience level in pro sports is like zero. You're expected no matter what your age is, and I'm even seeing it at the college level too. Like, some guys can do it and they can do it quick and they are blessed with that ability, and other guys, like, there is a learning curve for some players, and it takes a little bit of time to mature into that role. I am not ready to write off a guy like Tua at this point. I just first year quarterbacks, man, like sometimes you just got to be patient, and it's got to be the right fit, and they got to have those weapons, and hopefully they go and they draft a high level receiver on the outside for Tua.
No, yeah, but with Mac Jones going from like two of the best receivers in the country and one of the best overall put together, and for him in Washington, I got a trivia question for you. I saw it the other day. I couldn't believe it. Do you know how many receiving yards how many receptions Washington got from the tight end position last year outside of Logan Thomas?
I would imagine it is an abysmally low number.
10.
Jesus.
From 3 different receivers. So
wow.
Yeah, they need to upgrade the tight end position soon. So
yeah,
we'll see. But that's all the question I really have for you. How can people follow you on social media? Keep up with all
your stuff? For sure, man. Twitter, Instagram, both the same handle at Mike_Yam on Facebook. Happy to kind of interact with whoever, and love going back and forth with folks out there. And it's been a smorgasbord of stories. I know we covered a bunch of them in the NFL, and there's still more to come. So always good to be with you, man. I'm glad you're staying healthy, and hopefully we get to do this again real soon.